The fastest money to fix a cash squeeze is usually the money that buries you. This past Friday, I spoke to a brand doing $3 million on Amazon that is shrinking on purpose. They cut tacos from 11% to 3%, not because they got more efficient, but because they cannot afford to restock, sadly. Here's a real way to fund inventory, the true cost of each, and the two traps most brands don't see until it's too late. I'm Jasim, Eisa, CEO and founder of Voadera. Last year, we put $40 million of our own capital into inventory using the same approach I'm about to share. By the end, you'll know how to fund a restock without overpaying, without locking yourself in, and without handing over the one thing you can never get back. Why do brands, even profitable ones, run out of cash very quickly? So actually, this is a big misconception that profits equals that your brand being healthy. Cash is the oxygen of the business. You can be so profitable, but if you can't fund your next PO, everything else is irrelevant. And you can't look at your unit economics or your profit on a P&L line, like your profits on the P&L spreadsheet, and think that you're fine. There's so much more to it. And cash flow health is usually, or almost always, directly correlated to your cash conversion cycle. You can go to Google and type this in, but it's basically, in vague layman terms, the time from when you pay for inventory to your supplier, basically, until the time you get it back from your customer. How long is that distance? The longer it is, the worse. And sadly, for Amazon sellers, it's around 114 days. So if I'm giving my supplier a buck today, and let's say my customer is giving me $1.50, I'll get that in 115 days. And let's say I sell that inventory, it turns every month. Look how long and how many times I have to fund inventory until I get it back on the back end of it. So that's why brands go through this. And the brand I was speaking to, they were relying on a certain funding method, getting loans to fund their inventory. The loan access went away, which I'll get into later in this video. And once they got out of that, they just barely kept afloat every single month, even though their contribution margin, gross margin, is around 70%. I mean, they're selling an item for around $40. It's costing them $8 in costs. Yeah, take out fees, everything. They were still making on a gross level, almost doubling their money, $8 an item. After ads, everything, aggressive. So, and you can imagine, even with those numbers, because they didn't have the right cash flow setup, which we'll also talk about later, they were not able to fund their brand. And this creates a death spiral because you're low on cash, you can't fund POs, you can't invest in the marketing, your sales get less and less and less and less and less until you can no longer even cover your fixed cost. And that's truly when you go out of business, because you can't even cover your salary, payroll, all that kind of stuff. So you want to make sure that you understand your cash flow statement, your cash conversion cycle, and so you don't end up in an unhealthy situation. So you realize your cash conversion cycle is horrible and you have to go looking for money. Here's what changed today. In the past, Amazon used to actually issue very friendly APR loans, whether that was Amazon itself or even Goldman Sachs through Amazon. It used to be through the dashboard. They stopped doing financing for e-com brands. I think a lot of it has to do with aggregators going out of business and a lot of e-com brands going out of business and money being pulled out. A lot of banks got afraid, so they stopped giving traditional loans through that method anymore. And now a lot of the financing options are extremely predatory. So let's jump into the current financing options and what the real options look like today. The first one, and this is the healthiest one, is supplier net payment terms, right? And this is before we jump into the ones that are usually unhealthier. And I want to be careful using healthy and unhealthy. It depends on the situation. But let's jump into the first one again, supplier net payment terms. And this one is basically the simplest one, where you're working with the supplier, you're getting net terms from them. So like I mentioned earlier, if you pay on shipping, that's different than paying on delivery, right? Even though technically none of them are net terms, but that's still 8 weeks on the boat that you get additional cash flow that you don't have to calculate in your cash conversion cycle. Now, beyond that, do you get net 30 when it's delivered? Do you get net 60? Do you get net 90? And don't think, and I see a lot of brands with a limiting mindset that I can't get net 90. It's really all in their head. There's a program called Sinosure, Sinosure. You can have your brands, especially when they're in China, sign up for it. That's where the government of China helps fund cash flow as well. And I know a lot of brands, especially if you had a longer relationship, and I'm going to mention this later on the ways to fund and how we fund it. And this is one of the primary methods we use. $40 million in purchases. I'll drop a link to that video in the description later. We did it without taking debt. Again, we did other methods, but this is one of the methods that we used, is very healthy net payment terms. Now let's jump into the next one, which is lending. And lending comes in a lot of different forms. There's the basic one within the bank. Now we mentioned that Amazon took away that those are technically bank loans, right? But they took away that method. Now, if you're going to a traditional bank, they are still unfamiliar with the e-commerce landscape. Putting inventory as a collateral is something they're still unfamiliar with. You're also, usually if you're a brand doing 2 to 20 million, it costs them a lot to go through the hassle to set things up for you. Yeah, if you're a $600-700 million brand, you have more collateral on the line, you have more legitimacy, and you're also borrowing a larger amount, it's worth the headache for them. But usually if you're a smaller brand, you have better luck going to a local bank, or it's just going to be very high rates because they just assume your higher interest, especially with the latest events, as I mentioned. That's a big factor playing into banks just not being as formidable of an option today for e-commerce. In the future, once banks understand this business model more, there'll be more standardized options. But right now, there just isn't much. Within lending, another option is SBA loans. And this one is a great option if you're able to get eligible for it. And again, I don't want to say great because actually I don't take on interest for religious purposes. As a Muslim, I'm not supposed to take on interest. But from an economic standpoint, compared to other options within lending, that's where it becomes great. It's a much more friendlier loan. You have to also, it's also longer terms usually, more, let's say, standardized with who it accepts, rather than banks that kind of have a preference. It has to be, there's regulation to be more accepting. But within that, you can see a lot of options over there, and it depends on eligibility. Some seasons there's more offerings, some less, so it's more like it's not something set in stage. But if there is something you're eligible for, it's something to check out. I've seen a lot of e-com brands that have done very well with this. The third option and fourth option are closely related. They're RBFs and MCAs. So RBF is revenue-based financing and MCA is merchant cash advances. These are where we start falling into what I would call predatory loans. And I would urge a lot of brands to be careful with this. Again, there might be a situation where this is relevant if you need cash fast. That's the advantage. They give it to you on the spot, but they deduct directly from your cash balance, and they take an insane amount of APR. Research this on your own. Look at the thin lines if you're looking at something like this. But I would urge everyone to be very, very careful with these two options, as they can be extremely predatory. After that, within lending, we go into credit cards. This is one of the cooler options. This is one that you can get away without paying any interest on, and this is one we've also explored. Again, mentioning our options, we are limited to options that we don't pay interest on, so that is an interesting video that a lot of brands have benefited from. I'll attach the description at the end of the video. But basically, you can, Amex for example gives you 90 days to not pay any interest on a loan that you technically a loan that you take from them, right? And then you also get cash back. You can also use a website like Milio or Plastic, Plastic. I'm not associated with either of them, so or know anything. I can't vouch for them, but I know I think we've used them in the past and they've done well for us. But going back to the main point is, again, this is an option that gives you it's a shorter float, so you can't take it as long as other options, but it's still there. Within that, also another option is line of credit. This kind of goes under bank loans, so it's the same thing, but all of these fall within lending. The third option is equity-based investing. So you get investors, they buy a portion of it, they maybe buy for a royalty. This is also a healthy option, depends, especially if you get like a strategic investor that knows relationships. You kind of see how they go on Shark Tank, for example, and they want Lori because she has QVS, right? Or they want Mark Cuban because he can distribute it in the Dallas Mavericks. Let's say it's a certain consumable or beverage product, right? No, not anymore, he sold it, but it was still relevant then, very stupidly. I mean, they lost a great player with Luka Doncic, and it's run horribly now. But anyways, going back to the main point, is going to this point and within it is your own retained earnings. This is something we've done. For example, we've had friends and family invest with us, and we've also used my own earnings from the past business to fund into this one. Not as much as other methods, but again, if you have your retained earnings, you're an equity investor, you're going to own everything. But also other people that want to invest, you can also set up interesting structures, like for example 10% equity, but you can buy them out for double in 3 years, right? That way they don't have a long term. Or again, you can structure this creatively, but it's equity based investing at the end of the day. And that's actually where Voadera we come in a lot of times, is we work with brands to buy their inventory at a wholesale price and act as their exclusive distributor on online marketplaces. If that sounds interesting, come check us out at partnerships.voadera.com. But basically, we take a wholesale position, we give them better funding so they can buy more inventory, so they can invest in their advertising, and we start that spiral of growth, and how we average 35% year-over-year growth. With the option I mentioned, there are two traps to be very wary of and that I've seen brands heavily regret jumping into. The first one is the interest trap, and this is where, again, we mentioned it earlier in the options above, especially with RCAs and MCAs, merchant cash advances, but even with regular loans, you have to see what the APR is. If you're running at a 15-16% annual percentage yield, basically, of how much you're going to pay on your inventory or your loans, and your margins are only 10 or 15% or 20%, you're never going to get yourself outside of that hole that you dug yourself into. It's better to scale back and not order as much. So you have to make sure that the interest that you're paying for, your brand can truly afford it. From now, we go back to the P&L. From a P&L statement, yes, you can, maybe it's going to help you on a cash flow statement level, but can you afford it from a P&L statement level? And looking at that and making sure that you back into it. And the other option is to not take quick, rash loans when you're desperate, because you might regret it. And I've seen great brands die because of the loans that they took. I mean, Thrasio, it was because of leveraging in loans that they went out of business, a billion dollar company, and they overbought the wrong inventory. So that's where sometimes it's healthier to just cut certain SKUs, liquidate certain SKUs, and use that to fund and go a little bit, take a step back to get healthy financials, rather than be desperate and take something that's going to hurt you in the long term. And the other one, that's the other trap that's more hidden, is the control trap. Is you give up, for example, to get equity, to get funding, you give up your IP, your trademarks, your brand name, and then you don't, or you give up a majority stake in your company that you later on regret in the future. So you want to make sure that yes, that's the issue with taking on funding, is that you're desperate in the moment, but think this through 3 years ahead, 5 years ahead. Go to the spreadsheet, play with the numbers, see what it looks like, and weigh everything together to make sure that this is an overall healthy strategic decision, and don't let the short-term kind of overwhelm or risk cloud that judgment. So with all this being said, how do you decide what's appropriate for your brand? From what we see, it comes down to three things primarily with brands. The first one is, does the financing or funding option match your cash conversion cycle? The second one is, does it come at the cost of your protecting your brand or controlling your brand? And third one, can you truly afford it? Again, we mentioned the interest rates, we mentioned all that kind of stuff. From an economic standpoint, can you afford it? So make sure you reverse engineer into this. There's no one size fits all. The same option that could be great for one brand could be horrible. One example is like the SBA loan that we spoke highly of. If you need funding in 2 or 3 weeks for an upcoming PO, you run out of stock, good luck getting government regulation that short of a time. Same thing with credit cards. If you need your cash conversion 120 days, then you're going to lose that. You're not going to have a credit card that lets you float for that long, and you're going to pay high interest rate after that period. Or if you don't want to give up majority equity, but someone's offering that for funding, right? So understanding what your situation is. And before you go finding, investing, or funding everything, check out this reimbursement videos. Make sure you get every dollar back from Amazon before you go looking for external money. And if you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for future videos.